All right. Welcome back to the Broker's Voice. I am excited anytime I get to have somebody on who's not only a man of words, he's a man of action, or woman of words, woman in action. I get excited to have them on. And today, this guy he embodies this. Ben Connor of Connor Insurance in Indianapolis, Indiana. Ben, welcome aboard, man.
Andy, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You bet. So I always kick off the Broker's Voice with, how the heck did you get in the business? Most of us did not get in by design, but I would argue, Ben, you kind of did, because Connor Insurance is a generational thing. Talk about that.
Yeah, so Connor Insurance has been around since 1949. Started by my grandfather after he returned from World War II and found his wife in Indianapolis. So actually, a personality profile told him he should be an insurance agent. So, interesting enough. But yeah, so we're a third generation firm. Myself and several others are in the business. I started in 2006. And what's funny is I didn't really think through the whole coming into the business too much. So quite simply, going into college, I was like, well, I kind of like my dad's, his freedom. He was always at my sporting events. He was always present. He was home for dinner. And that was noticeable to me growing up and watching my dad. I appreciated his relationships. So the people he did business with, I actually got to meet growing up and in high school and that sort of thing. And they were always awesome people. And then lastly, I like, the things in life that we are able to do through his work. So the kind of the income side and that sort of thing. So I thought, hey, like flexibility, relationships, and decent income, like that's good enough for me. Went to college, studied business. Didn't really apply myself at all. Wish I would have probably a little bit more, but then came into the business a month after I graduated college. And I remember we're in a second floor suite. Andy, you've been here. And I remember walking up the stairs, putting my hand on the door handle and just kind of like pausing. And I was like, I hope I like this. Like I never thought about insurance sales. I was like, it doesn't sound very fun actually, but let's roll. Let's do this. And by God's grace, it worked well for me. I gravitated towards the benefit side of our organization. And it just kind of naturally fit with, I believe, the talents that God's given me. So,
well, and I think that message right there, you and I are probably very aligned, because Connor Insurance is both a property casualty and a benefits agency.
yeah.
And I've worked for several of those myself, but I too early on gravitated towards benefits because I think the educational piece is huge. The fact that you can literally impact someone's life with what we do. And I want you to go back, because I imagine growing up in a family where your dad's running an insurance agency, you probably maybe spent a couple summers helping out, or working in the office. Then you graduate college and now you're going to work. I'm guessing, correct me if I'm wrong, you were a producer, maybe not as much in the leadership role at that point. And now here you've elevated to running Connor Insurance.
Yep.
As you elevated throughout that process over the last 10, 12 years, what would you say have been the biggest mindset shifts for you, maybe going from I'm here to just produce to now I have to run this entire agency?
Yeah, a lot of mindset differences in that. I guess on the more surface level side, what I found to be really difficult is going from a peer to a leader with people inside of your organization. That was hard, I think, for everybody to some extent. And if some people had a harder time with that than others, that they are probably not here any longer, just because it's just the way it is. But I think coming into the business, you're right. We started as a producer and then slowly got into leadership. A couple things happened. One, I'll always say I had an incredible opportunity in front of me. And my dad and my uncles, who were the second generation in the business, they were very open-handed with not hiding things, being very transparent, giving me opportunities to kind of get involved and learn the ownership side or the leadership side, management, whatever you want to call it. And they allowed us to, at an early age, try things out. And we failed. And so, in some circumstances, failed miserably. And they were here to kind of coach us along the way and that sort of thing. So I certainly had the opportunity. But then I kind of found out, and I think something to be mindful in this business is with the partnership of my dad and myself in my 20s, we landed a lot of business with his relational and strategic side. And then I was, quite frankly, just a workhorse. And I was single through my 20s. So I get here at 7 in the morning and leave at 7 at night. And, they'd ask to go to my friends would ask me to go to happy hour. I was like, at one point, I was just like, I'm not going to do that anymore. Like, let's just figure this thing out and see if we can win. And I just kind of found out once you start winning a lot, you just start getting included in things because you have influence. And that's certainly there's a responsibility with that. But just kind of those two things are put together with opportunity, and then just some producer success in combination with my father just kind of led to kind of where we got, where we're at today.
I think there's no secret to success. You talked about working your face off in your early 20s and realizing what's important to you. And I think that's also why, you were, was it last year, a Broker of the Year finalist?
2020.
And that was very well-deserved. It was a very well-deserved honor, Ben.
Thank you.
I would love your thoughts on this. And I know I get resistance when I talk about this, but one thing I find interesting in the insurance industry at large is you see a lot of people elevated to a role of leader because they were a good producer.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean they're a great leader. And so I've had the chance to work with a lot of agencies, and once in a while you see those that appear to have a lot of outside success. And then you peek in the curtain and you realize what's going on, and the culture inside always doesn't match that outward success. To you now running Connor Insurance, what does leadership mean to you when it comes to running an insurance agency? Maybe what are some principles? What are some ideals that you guys strive for to make sure you are running a fine-tuned machine?
Yeah, I think values is probably number one. I'm co-authoring a book, and the chapter that I'm focused on talks about just when I started out early, I was trying to copycat other people, and I wasn't necessarily paying attention specifically to my personal values and how I led others, and it failed miserably. So I think values and being authentic to like who you truly are, surrounding yourself with good people. This is a team thing. I have a lot of good leaders surrounding me inside of our organization. And if you get to know us, you'll say, wow, they're different. Todd is different than Ben. It's like, yeah, that's why it works really well. Because we complement each other really well. And I would say this, I think one of the things that my dad and my uncles they hammered on since we were kids is that family trumps everything. And I think that parlays into relationships, and that, and my dad said early on, there's no amount of money worth betraying someone's trust. So just that idea that, if we have a disagreement or whatever within our family, it better never be about money. And the reality is that, with Thanksgiving and Christmas, like, you better be able to show up and be able to love your family regardless of what's going on at work. And there's a dying to self that happens when you have that mentality. And I think, that's something in our organization that, like, we set out to say, I don't care what position you're in our organization. I don't care if you're, in an entry role or if you're coming in as a heavy hitter, right? Like, it's not about you. And so that's kind of some of the things that are kind of core to our company and our culture.
I hope everybody heard what you just said, because you said family trumps all, and by definition, family, it just doesn't mean blood family. We're talking everybody who's sitting inside that office.
That's right.
And I think to that point, unfortunately, sometimes in the industry, the phrase is revenue trumps all. And you see what I've seen is an agency where maybe there's a producer who's crushing it, but to be frank, he or she's kind of a cancer to the company. So instead of solving that problem, they let that person kind of live out on their own island because, man, they're producing, just let them be. But it's actually having a negative impact on the organization at large. And so I'm so glad you brought that up. You also talked about differentiators, Ben. This is something if you're willing to share. When I ask agencies what their differentiators are, still the number one answer I get is our customer service. And yes, you may have the best customer service our industry has ever seen. The problem is your competitors are saying the same thing. You guys have one heck of a differentiator with what you've built with City on the Hill.
Yeah.
And so let's get into that just a little bit. What led you to the moment where you're like, we're going to create something that's going to be very different from what our industry, you've created a product that you are now taking out to your prospects to help them create a successful result. So what led you to down the path of, we need to not just talk different, we need to start executing differently as well? Yeah.
I think sometimes you just do stuff, and this happens to me at least. I'm a person of action, and sometimes, those things end up not being great ideas and we fail. And sometimes they can be successful. And City on a Hill is something that the concept in and of itself is really strong. You're like, okay, A plus B, like this is connecting. But actually, now that I look back on what we've been doing for the last almost 2 years now, it really fits into our core. It fits into our values. It fits into, just who we can serve best. So so City on a Hill is a program that is designed to serve Christian schools, universities, and churches. And it's an ecosystem where we can really meet people wherever they're at and solve a problem. And then we can support them with a lot of, other resources around their operation. But ultimately, it's founded in a niche that we were successful with. And honestly, just a couple of really strong relationships where we're able to broaden this thing on a national level and start supporting schools that, and those three segments are very different in operation. Churches and how they approach healthcare is different than Christian schools or even Christian universities. So there has to be different application, but ultimately, it's core to what, who we are. And it turned out to just be a really strong program and a good fit for us.
Well, and I'd love for you to quickly talk, because I think a lot of people who heard what you just said hit that pause button because they're like, wait, your market, your prospects, that's too narrow. We want to serve everybody. When you guys made the decision, because it goes back to your values, which I absolutely love, that you're going to serve Christian schools, universities, and churches, which people would argue that's a very narrow market, but I'm a huge believer in always go for the smallest viable market. What kind of results have you seen by going narrow?
It's kind of hard to describe because it's kind of layered results. So I'll give you so we literally just launched this program in the last 2 years. And in our first year, we met with over 125, I believe, different Christian schools. Some are great fits and we can assist, and some maybe aren't, and it's a process, right? And that's great. So the volume was incredible, and I think there's a lot of clarity when you go narrow. So not only are we building like a really cool program, we're actually like just bubbling out, and you just kind of it's like peeling back the onion of different partnerships and different things that you can add to the relationship where it's just next level. And I guess I would say, lastly, along those lines, you really get to learn the right questions to ask, or, just the depths of the operation in relation to finances and that sort of thing. So we can ask good questions. And we can be consultative because we're really learning the segment, and we knew it before, but we're so much deeper now than we were 2 years ago. when we started out.
And what I love what you've done is City on the Hill is a product, right? And I think when people hear product, they instantly go a tangible health insurance plan, which it is. But more importantly, City on the Hill is a philosophy.
That's right.
And what you've done is by having this product philosophy, you're now going out and seeing which Christian schools, universities, and churches are a fit for it. You're not doing what most do in our industry, which is begging for business and getting interviewed by the prospect. You're actually interviewing the prospect
Sure.
to see if they're a good fit for City on the Hill. I absolutely love that. And so as we look forward then, with what you guys are doing with City on the Hill, it is your differentiator. You can literally go and sell that differentiator. What advice would you give advisors in our industry who are trying to leverage what we have to be different moving forward? What advice would you give that young advisor today who's saying, I've been doing what I've been taught, but it's the way we've always done things. How can I be different, Ben? What would you say to that advisor?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would tell an advisor to dig deep into their passion, because where their passion is ultimately where they're going to excel, in their journey going forward or in their career. So, for instance, I went through K through 12. I was at a Christian school in Indianapolis called Heritage Christian. When I graduated there, I went to a Christian university called Indiana Wesleyan in Marion, Indiana. My best friends to this day are people I went to school with. And, so those schools changed my life. And so from that experience and from that perspective, I have a ton of passion for Christian education. And, that's my personal passion. And I think that lights something in me and in our organization to, when we're serving the faculty and staff at those schools, I can personalize that to that's Mr. Watt, that's Mr. Ambrose, that's Mrs. Herwig, or name a teacher. It doesn't matter. It's them. It's Mrs. Wiley. And I'm caring for them, and I can just reflect on how much they change my life. So,
yeah. And I don't want what you said to go overlooked. Your passion is to help Christian education. You just happen to do it via the channel of health insurance.
That's right.
And I think that's so important. Your why is bigger than the health insurance you're selling. And that's what's so, that is why Connor Insurance is having the success it's having, which is great. A couple more questions for you. When you look back on your career, you're still young and getting after it, but because it feels like you've been in it forever because you got out the day you went in the day you got out of college. When you think about all the mentors you've had, from your grandfather to your father to some of the shared mentors we've had in the industry, what's one lesson or one piece of advice you can think of that has really just embodied your career?
One thing, huh?
It's a tough question.
I think it's the lesson of preparation. Every mentor I've had, you look at what they've done, it is soaked in preparation. I mean, there's no winging it. There's no when they showed up. And again, this kind of goes back to my grandfather's story even, but I could talk about mentors all day long. My grandfather was actually, his story was when he was in World War II, he was missing in action for 30 months in the Philippines. And he was in the jungles and trying to survive. And he wasn't by himself. He had good support. But everything was life and death. And granted, not everything is life and death in our world today, but his approach even after the war was that. And I think that just kind of is embedded in our family, that when we are approached with things that are important or things that are serious for other people, you prepare and you show up as if it's important and it's serious and there's no joking around. And I think it's really easy to do that in our industry in health insurance, because if we show up to an employer that's spending $1 million in whatever, their health insurance benefits or whatever, that's serious business. That's no joke. And so you prepare and you show up.
Yeah, I think, again, people in the health insurance industry, we don't realize how important our job is. And our advice for employers could be the difference between them keeping their doors open or not. It could be the difference between a consumer, one of their employees going bankrupt or not. We have a very big impact on what goes inside organizations. And what you just said, my motto right now, Ben, is actually preparation equals green lights. I don't know if for anybody listening and you've read Matthew McConaughey's book, Green Lights, but when you're prepared, the universe, God gives you green lights. Remember, have you ever been driving through town one day and you're hitting every green light and you're just like, yeah, that's green lights. When you're prepared, life will give you green lights. So I'm so glad you said that. Well, last question, because I know you're busy. Most important question I'm going to ask, Ben, and I'm going to put my athlete hat on for a second. When in the world can we expect Indiana basketball to be relevant again?
That is a great question. I am hoping the Mike Woodson coaching experiment is the successful one. I actually have really high hopes. They've brought in a lot of heavy hitters. First of all, he's fantastic in and of himself, and he's got the credentials by alone to do a good job. But they've also surrounded him with other really strong leaders that they're not messing around. The challenge is, though, I will have to say this. You kind of wonder if, are we holding on to something that's just not there? Like, are we like Nebraska when it comes to football? Or, there's those teams that they're like, we are top tier. And if someone from Nebraska is like, hey, our program is top drawer, I'd be like,
It's funny. My Badgers just beat Nebraska this weekend in football. And that was a conversation I actually had with a Nebraska fan out here. As I said, when was the last time Nebraska was relevant? It was the late 90s.
Yeah.
And so to your point, here's what I believe Woodson's going to help is he's an NBA coach, right? He's come from the NBA. If I'm a high school kid and I want to be prepared for the NBA, guess who I'm going to go learn from? The guy who's coached at the NBA level. So I too have high hopes. You're right. There could be the twinge that the glory days are in the past.
I hope not.
But it just doesn't seem right when Indiana basketball isn't relevant. It's the Hoosier state. It's the state that loves basketball.
That's right. There's a basketball goal in every driveway. And, if you ever have a chance to go to Indiana basketball game at Assembly Hall, it is an experience like none other. And, it's loud. You have, 18,000 referees in the stands, and it's epic.
Well, Ben, I want to thank you. I know you got to get back to work, but thank you for your time today. Like I said, any chance I get to have somebody on who is executing on an extremely high level, I'm honored to do it. And Connor Insurance is a shining example of that. So
really appreciate that. Thank you, Andy. Thanks for having me.
Keep crushing it, man. And for everybody listening in, I hope you take Ben's words to heart. I hope you took a lot of notes, because this is how you win today. This is how you run a health insurance agency. And I hope Ben is giving you some clarity, because when clarity and confidence collide, massive action happens. So go take that action today.